Jack Rourke had lived a life on the run. It wasn't just a choice he'd made, it was a necessity. He had been on the move for the last 15 years, constantly changing planets, names, and appearances. He had to stay ahead, always alert, always moving. The galaxy was full of enemies, but none of them compared to her. The Hunter. Her name was Serena Darrow, and she had been chasing him since the day he first made himself a target. At first it had been a thrill. He was a skilled fugitive, able to slip through the tightest security, avoid the most deadly traps. But Serena was different. She wasn't like the others. She didn't give up, didn't falter, didn't hesitate. Every time Jack thought he'd escaped, she was there, waiting, always one step behind or one step ahead. Her relentless pursuit had become his nightmare. For 15 years, Jack had been hunted across countless planets, through ancient ruins, deep forests, vast cities, and desert wastelands. Wherever he went, she followed. She was methodical, careful, and always calculated. Jack had always thought it was just business. After all, he was a former military strategist turned fugitive, and people like him had enemies. But Serena's hunt had become something more personal. It felt like she knew him, as if she had been part of his past, a shadow in his history. Jack had tried to track her down, but the trail always went cold. Every time he thought he'd find her, it was like she had disappeared into thin air. Yet there was always something in the back of his mind telling him that this wasn't just a regular bounty. This was different. He remembered the first time they'd come face to face, 5 years ago on a dark and rainy world called Valeria. 7. He'd been hiding in the Undercity, waiting for his contacts to arrange an escape route when Serena found him. She didn't announce herself. She didn't give a speech about capturing him or collecting her reward. No, Serena just walked into the room, her footsteps soft but determined. She had been wearing the same dark clothes she always wore, no distinguishing marks or emblems. She was just a hunter. Her face had been unreadable, her eyes cold as steel. "You're not going anywhere," she had said. There was no panic in her voice, no anger, just calm certainty. Jack had fought her, of course. It was instinct. He'd been trained for years to fight back, to never back down. But Serena was different. She knew his moves before he even made them. Their battle had been intense, and for the first time in years, Jack had found himself outmatched. He barely managed to escape, but there was something that stuck with him. As he lay in hiding, nursing his wounds, something about that encounter gnawed at him. He wasn't just running from a bounty hunter. He was running from someone who seemed to know him better than anyone else. It wasn't just that Serena was a skilled fighter. It was that she knew his weaknesses. She knew his patterns. She knew how he thought. Jack had never believed in coincidences. There had to be a reason why she always found him. Why every time he changed his location, she was right behind him. After that encounter, Jack began to dig. He started searching for any trace of Serena's past. Any hint of where she had come from or why she was hunting him so relentlessly, but what he found only deepened the mystery. Serena Darrow was an enigma. There were no records of her existence before her arrival as a bounty hunter. No family, no pass, nothing. Just a cold professional hunter and a long list of successful missions. But something about her felt wrong. Jack began to wonder if she was just another pawn in a game he didn't fully understand. It didn't make sense. Why would someone go after him for so long without ever explaining why? He had enemies, yes, but none of them had ever chased him with such focus. None of them had ever seemed so determined. One night in the depths of the darkened city of Corvit 9, Jack came across a piece of information that shocked him. It was an encrypted file, buried deep within a black market database, hidden among stolen military intel. It was a record of a secret program, an experiment, one that had been abandoned years ago. The name at the top of the file read, Project Phoenix. Jack wasn't sure what the project was, but the name sounded familiar. He dug deeper, his heart pounding in his chest. It didn't take long before he uncovered the truth. The project was about creating the perfect soldier, a series of experiments meant to breed out emotions, focusing purely on survival, precision, and the ability to track and capture targets without hesitation. The project had been deemed a failure years ago, but the file mentioned one specific name that made Jack's blood run cold: Serena Darrow. The file detailed how she had been the 10th subject in the program.
The 10th attempt at creating the ultimate hunter.
Jack's mind raced as he read the file. He had assumed that Serena was just another skilled bounty hunter, but this was something else entirely. She wasn't just after him because of a bounty. She had been created for this purpose. To track him down. To find him. To kill him. The realization hit him like a wave. I would be so happy he wasn't being hunted by a professional bounty hunter. He was being hunted by someone who didn't even know why she was chasing him. He had never thought of her as a victim, but now everything had changed. Serena wasn't the hunter. She was the hunted, just like him. The next morning, Jack made his decision. He couldn't keep running. If he was going to end this, he needed to face her, to talk to her, to show her the truth. She had to know that she had been manipulated just as he had been. She had to know that the game they were playing wasn't of her choosing, but that would mean confronting the one person he had spent 15 years avoiding. It would mean putting his life at risk. But Jack wasn't afraid anymore. He was tired of running. As he prepared for the confrontation, Jack's thoughts wandered to what might happen next. Would Serena believe him? Would she accept the truth? Or would she just see him as another enemy, another target to hunt down? He didn't know the answer, but there was one thing Jack was certain of. The next time they met, it would be different. This time, it would not be a game. Jack had never been one to shy away from danger, but the moment he saw the coordinates leading to his next meeting place, a part of him wished he could turn back. He had spent the last 15 years running, never stopping long enough to truly think about what had led him to this point. He had kept his distance from the one person who had relentlessly hunted him, but now he had to confront her. Serena Darrow wasn't just a hunter. She was a product of a military experiment that had turned her into something more, something dangerous. Jack had to face the truth, not just for his survival, but for hers too. The storm outside the shelter where Jack had been hiding had turned the sky into a dark, angry blanket. It was the kind of night that made the heart race and the mind wander, thinking about every possible outcome. The coordinates led him to a small, abandoned base on the outer edge of the planetary system, a place that looked forgotten by time, tucked away in a remote part of the galaxy. It was the perfect spot for a final confrontation. The weather would keep any bystanders away, and it would give him the peace of mind to think clearly, away from the chaos of the world. Jack wasn't sure what kind of reception he would get when he met Serena face to face again, but he had made up his mind he had to make her understand. She had been manipulated just like he had. He had to show her that the hunt wasn't personal. It had never been about him. It was about the forces pulling the strings, controlling both of their lives. As he stepped out into the cold, his boots sinking into the soft dirt, Jack's mind raced. His thoughts kept coming back to that file he had uncovered, the file about Project Phoenix. It was clear now. Serena had been created for one purpose, to track him down, and yet she had no idea why. She was a victim of the system just like him. He had hoped that by confronting her, he could somehow stop the endless cycle they were both trapped in. Maybe, just maybe, he could free them both from this deadly game. Jack didn't know how long he'd been walking when he finally arrived at the base. The walls were cracked, and vines clung to the structure, giving it an air of eerie silence. He stepped inside, his hand resting on the blaster at his side, but he hoped he wouldn't need to use it. The inside of the base was cold and empty. The faint sound of dripping water echoed through the halls. Jack didn't have to wait long before he heard the soft shuffle of footsteps approaching from the darkness. Serena. She didn't announce herself this time. He didn't expect her to. She was a shadow, always lurking just out of sight, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. "You've been waiting for me?" Jack said, his voice steady but tinged with the tension that had been building inside him. Serena stepped into the dim light, her face as unreadable as ever. Her eyes locked onto him, filled with the same cold determination he had seen in her all these years. She was dressed the same way she always was. Dark, tactical gear, her long hair pulled back into a tight braid. "Always," she replied. Her voice was like ice, but there was something beneath it, a hint of confusion, of uncertainty, that Jack had never heard before. "I know what you're going to say," Jack continued, his eyes never leaving hers. "I've been running for years, but I'm done running. It's time we talk." Her eyes narrowed, the familiar fire igniting in them. She raised a hand to the blaster on her hip, her fingers brushing the cold metal. "I've heard enough of your lies," she spat, her tone cold. "You think you can talk your way out of this? Think again, Rourke." But Jack didn't back down. He stood tall, his mind focused on the task at hand. You don't understand, Serena. You've been hunting me for so long, but you don't know why. You don't know the truth about what's been done to you." For a moment, there was silence. The air was thick with tension. Jack could see the flicker of doubt in her eyes, the brief moment of hesitation that she always tried to hide. But this time, she didn't immediately pull the trigger. "You don't know what I've been through," she said, her voice softening slightly. Jack could see the pain in her eyes, the same pain that had driven her for so long. She had been taught to fight, to hunt, to never question the mission. But now, standing before him, The truth was starting to seep through the cracks in the armor she had built around herself. "I know exactly what you've been through," Jack said. "I know because they did the same thing to me. We were both part of the same program, Project Phoenix. It was supposed to make perfect soldiers. Soldiers with no emotions, no weaknesses. And you, Serena, you were the 10th attempt. You were never meant to have a life."
You were just a tool. A weapon.
Serena's eyes widened, and for the first time in years, Jack saw a flicker of something human in her gaze. Confusion. Fear. The truth was breaking through, and she couldn't hide from it anymore. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "That's not possible. That can't be true." But Jack saw the doubt in her eyes, the cracks in the walls she had built around herself. She didn't want to believe it, but the evidence was undeniable. She had been created, manipulated, just like him. "It is true," Jack said, his voice firm. "They erased your memories. They made you believe you were just a hunter, but you were never meant to remember. They took your past from you, Serena. Everything that you thought you knew was a lie." Serena took a step back, her mind racing as the weight of his words hit her like a punch. She shook her head again, this time with more force, trying to push away the thoughts that were flooding her mind. "No," she muttered. "This isn't real. You're lying. You just want to manipulate me. You want me to stop hunting you." Jack reached out, his hand held out in a gesture of peace. "I'm not lying. I'm trying to help you. You've been used. You've been controlled. But it's not too late. We can stop this. We can take them down together." For the first time in their entire history of chasing each other, Serena hesitated. Her hand hovered over the blaster, but she didn't draw it. Her mind was fighting the truth. Everything she had known, everything she had believed in, was crumbling before her eyes. "You think I can just forget all of this?" she asked, her voice shaking. "You think I can just walk away from everything?" "I think you deserve a chance to choose," Jack replied, his voice steady. "You're not just a weapon. You're a person. You have a right to your own life. Don't let them control you anymore." Serena was quiet for a long time, her eyes shifting from Jack to the blaster on her hip. She was torn. The mission had been everything to her, the only thing that had ever made sense in her world. But now, the mission was nothing more than a lie. And Jack had always been the enemy. But now he was offering her a way out. "You've been hunting me for so long, Serena," Jack said softly. "But the truth is, we've both been hunted, and now we have a chance to stop running. Together." The words hung in the air, their weight heavy. Serena took a deep breath, her fingers trembling as they hovered over the blaster. Jack watched her, his heart pounding in his chest. This was it. This was the moment that would decide everything. Slowly, her hand dropped away from the blaster. "I don't know if I can trust you," she whispered, the words barely audible, "but I have to know the truth." Jack stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "I'll help you find it, I promise." For the first time in 15 years, the hunter lowered her weapon, and for the first time in his life, Jack Rourke didn't feel like he was running anymore. The air in the abandoned base felt heavier now. Jack and Serena stood across from each other, the tension thick between them. Jack had thought he was ready for this moment, ready to face her and help her understand the truth. But even now, seeing Serena's uncertainty, he realized just how deeply the lies ran. She was a product of the system, shaped and controlled by forces beyond her control. And now that she had begun to question those lies, the world she had known was starting to crumble. Serena stood still, her eyes scanning the dark walls of the base as if looking for something to anchor her thoughts. Jack could see the struggle on her face. He had spent 15 years running, trying to escape his past, but now he was trying to help her face hers. The difference was that Serena didn't know her past. She didn't know who she really was. All she had were memories that had been carefully constructed, like a broken puzzle that someone else had put together. "I don't know how to fix this," Serena muttered, almost to herself. She was still trying to grasp what Jack had told her. She had spent her entire life hunting, chasing down fugitives, thinking she was following her purpose, but now that purpose was meaningless. "I don't know who I am without the mission." Jack's heart ached for her. She had been raised, trained, and molded into a weapon. Her entire life had been a lie, a series of missions with no understanding of why they were so important, no real reason other than that she had been told it was her job, her purpose. Jack knew that kind of life, that feeling of being controlled, being trapped in a role that wasn't your own. "You don't need to fix it," Jack said, his voice calm yet firm. "You don't have to be anyone's tool anymore. You can make your own choices, Serena. You can live your life however you want. You're not just some soldier in a program. You're a person. She looked at him, her gaze hard, like she was trying to decipher whether he was telling the truth or trying to manipulate her. He could see the confusion, the fear, the anger in her eyes. It was all there, swirling inside her. But there was something else too, a glimmer of hope buried deep beneath the surface. I was never given a choice, she said, her voice cracking slightly. I was born for one thing, to hunt you down. How do I just stop? The question hung in the air between them, thick with the weight of her confusion. Jack wanted to reach out, to tell her that it wasn't too late, that she could rebuild her life. But he knew it wasn't that simple. The damage had been done. Her memories had been altered, her mind reshaped into something it wasn't meant to be. Still, Jack believed that somewhere deep down, Serena could find herself again. It wouldn't be easy, but he had to believe it was possible. You're right, Jack said slowly, choosing his words carefully. You weren't given a choice, but that doesn't mean you can't make one now. The people who did this to us, they've controlled our lives, but they don't have to control our future. We can stop them. Together. Serena's gaze softened just a little, as if his words were beginning to reach her. But there was still that wall between them. She had been hunting him for so long, and now he was telling her that everything she had believed in was a lie. It was a hard pill to swallow, and Jack knew it wouldn't be easy to convince her that she had the power to change everything. You don't understand, Serena said, shaking her head. I was raised for this. The hunt, the chase, it's all I've ever known. I was made to be the perfect soldier, the perfect tracker. I don't know anything else. How do I just turn that off? Jack could see the internal struggle in her eyes. The mission had been everything to her, and now it was all falling apart. But Jack had a different perspective. He had lived through the same kind of training, the same kind of manipulation. But over the years, he had learned that even someone who had been shaped by others could find their own path. It wasn't easy, but it was possible. The hunt doesn't define you, Serena, Jack said gently. It's just a part of your past. It's not who you are. You're more than that. She looked at him for a long time, her expression unreadable. It was clear she was torn between the life she had known and the possibility of something more, something different. But Jack wasn't going to back down. He had spent far too long running from his past to let her continue running from hers. You deserve more than just being a weapon, Jack continued, his voice steady. You deserve a life. You deserve freedom. I know it's hard to believe, but you can find that. You can be whoever you choose to be. For a long moment, Serena said nothing. The silence stretched between them, heavy and thick with all the unspoken thoughts that neither of them could voice. Finally she spoke, her voice soft but resolute. I don't know how to trust you, she said quietly. I don't know if I can believe anything anymore. I want to try. I want to see if there's more to me than just this. I want to know who I really am. Jack felt a wave of relief wash over him, but he knew this was just the beginning. Serena's journey to freedom wouldn't be easy, but it was a journey worth taking. And for the first time in 15 years, Jack didn't feel alone. They were in this together. We'll figure it out, Jack said, his voice calm and confident. We'll take it one step at a time, and we'll stop them. The people who did this to us, they'll pay for what they've done. Serena nodded slowly, still unsure, but willing to trust him for the first time. She didn't have all the answers, and Jack didn't have a foolproof plan, but for the first time in years, they were on the same side, and that was enough. The two of them stood there, in the quiet of the abandoned base, unsure of what the future held, but determined to face it together. The road ahead would be difficult, filled with obstacles, dangers, and the unknown. But as long as they had each other, they would keep moving forward, one step at a time. I don't know where to start, Serena said, her voice tinged with doubt. But I'm ready to find out. Jack smiled, the first genuine smile he had given in years. That's all we can do. And with that, they turned away from the base, stepping into the unknown, knowing that whatever happened next, they would face it together. The journey from the base had been quiet, but not peaceful. Both Jack and Serena had a lot on their minds. As they made their way through the wilderness of the abandoned planet, every step seemed to carry the weight of their pasts, lives shaped by forces beyond their control. For Jack, it was the memories of years spent on the run, hiding from those who had betrayed him. For Serena, it was the years of being a weapon, a tool designed for one purpose, to hunt. Despite their quiet surroundings, neither of them could find peace. It was as if their pasts were always lurking just behind them, waiting for the right moment to catch up. Jack had hoped that by confronting Serena, by showing her the truth, They could find some way to stop the cycle they were both trapped in. But now, as they traveled deeper into the unknown, Jack realized that there was no easy way out. There would be no simple answers, no quick fixes. Their enemies were powerful, and the world they were living in was far more complicated than either of them had expected. They had made it this far, but they couldn't keep running forever. It was time to face the truth. Time to stop running from the very people who had created them. Serena was still processing everything Jack had told her, her mind struggling to accept the idea that her entire life had been nothing more than a series of lies. She had spent so long believing in the mission, believing in the hunt, that now even the thought of freedom felt strange. She wasn't sure how to break free from the years of training, from the mindset that had been drilled into her since she was a child. For the first time, she felt lost. But Jack was there, guiding her forward, showing her that there was something more to life than just the mission. Even if she didn't know who she was or where to begin, Jack was offering her a chance at a new life. But Serena wasn't the only one struggling. Jack's past had always been one of survival. He had spent so many years running, hiding, trying to stay one step ahead of his enemies, that he had never really stopped to think about what came next. Now, as he looked at Serena, he realized that he couldn't keep running either. It was time for both of them to face the truth. "We need to stop them," Jack said, breaking the silence that had fallen between them. "The people who did this to us. They can't be allowed to keep controlling our lives." Serena nodded, her eyes focused on the path ahead. "But how?" she asked, her voice quiet. "How do we even begin to take them down?" Jack thought about it for a moment. He didn't have all the answers. He didn't have a plan. But he knew one thing. They couldn't do this alone. "We can't do it by ourselves," Jack said, looking at her. "We need to find allies. There are people who've been hurt by them, people who want to see this system fall. We need to gather them. We need to bring this fight to them." Serena didn't respond right away. She was still lost in her thoughts, her mind racing with the weight of everything Jack had said. The thought of joining a rebellion, of fighting back against the very system that had shaped her, was terrifying. But at the same time, it felt like the only choice. The only way to stop running. "We'll need a plan," Serena finally said, her voice steady but uncertain. "We can't just charge in blindly. They're too powerful. We need to be smart about this." Jack smiled slightly, relieved that Serena was starting to come around. "You're right. But we'll figure it out. We've got time. And together, we can make it work." For the first time, Serena allowed herself a small breath of relief. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in her life, she felt like she had a choice. A real choice. They spent the next few days traveling, sticking to the cover of the wild terrain to avoid being detected. Jack knew they had to find a safe place to regroup, somewhere they could plan their next move. But they couldn't stay in one spot for too long. They were still being hunted, and their enemies would stop at nothing to track them down. One evening, as the sun set behind the jagged hills, Jack and Serena found an abandoned outpost, a forgotten hideaway from the days when the planet had been populated by miners. It was perfect. It was isolated, hidden, and had just enough supplies to keep them going. They set up camp, and Jack immediately began working on a plan. He knew that the people they were up against were powerful, with resources and connections that reached across the galaxy, but they also had weaknesses. Every system, every organization had its cracks. Jack's job was to find those cracks, to exploit them, and to bring down their enemies from the inside. "I've been thinking," Serena said, breaking into his thoughts. "If we're going to fight back, we need to know who we're up against. Who's behind all of this? Who's the real enemy?" Jack nodded, his mind already working through the possibilities. "The people who created Project Phoenix. The ones who've been manipulating both of us. They're part of a larger organization. They've been operating in the shadows for years. They control governments, corporations, military operations. They're everywhere." Serena looked at him, her face serious. "So they're not just a few rogue scientists. This is bigger than that." "Much bigger," Jack confirmed. "And that's why we need to be careful. If we want to take them down, we need to be strategic. We need to find allies, gather intelligence, and hit them where it hurts." Serena didn't respond at first. She was still processing everything Jack had said. The idea of going up against a force like that was overwhelming, but she knew it had to be done. She couldn't go back to being the hunter, the tool. She had to make a choice for herself. "We'll need to be smart," she said, finally meeting Jack's eyes. "We can't just walk into this blindly. We need a strategy. We need a team." Jack smiled at her determination. For the first time since they had met, he saw the spark of a true fighter in Serena. She wasn't just the hunter anymore. She was someone who was ready to fight for something more, and that was the kind of ally Jack needed by his side.
"We'll get there," Jack said, "one step at a time." The next few weeks were filled with planning, gathering supplies, and preparing for the fight ahead.
They reached out to people who had been part of the underground movements, those who had fought against the system, and those who had lost everything to the organizations Jack and Serena were up against. Each person they found added to their strength, each person bringing a piece of the puzzle they needed to destroy the system that had controlled their lives for so long. As they built their resistance, Serena started to see a future she hadn't even thought possible. She had been created to hunt, to be a weapon, but now she was part of something bigger, a fight for freedom, a fight for her own life. She no longer felt like she was just the 10th victim. She was Serena Darrow, and she had a choice. And with Jack by her side, she knew they could do it. They could stop running. They could stop being controlled. They could bring down the people who had destroyed their lives. They had finally found their fight, and they were ready to win.